the timing of this is a little strange because we talked about earlier this week. I mean, the mayor
You think Eric Adams should be grateful, Andy?
Yeah. Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for February 13th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, gentlemen, RFK Jr. was confirmed today, Thursday, as Secretary of HHS. All Republicans, except for Mitch McConnell, voted yes. Also today, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted along party lines to advance the nomination of Kash Patel to lead the FBI. So, Tom, another good day for the president on Capitol Hill. What do you make of today's moves?
It is interesting that, Trump is getting basically all of the Republican senators on all these votes, except for Mitch McConnell, which is just sort of inexplicable. But he's getting Murkowski, he's getting Susan Collins, he's getting, and Todd Young in the case of Tulsi Gabbard. So the Republican caucus is unified, and this is part of what's different this time around. I mean, Trump has really solidified his control over the party. There isn't much resistance to him, particularly when it comes to his nominees. I think everybody's of the mindset, all the Republicans, or most of them anyway, that he deserves to get his appointees through, and so we're going to have RFK Jr. It's Maha times. We'll see how he's going to make America healthy again.
That always makes me think of fish when I hear that. Like, I'm going to have a maha maha. But Carl, what do you make of the McConnell vote? He's a polio survivor. He talked about that when he explained his vote. But someone once said today, he's a man who doesn't have any F's left to give. Does that about sum it up, or what's going on with Mitch?
Well, he stepped down as Senate Majority Leader, but he did not leave his Senate seat. He's been there 40 years on Capitol Hill, and I think he wanted to go out this way. He doesn't have to herd cats anymore. He's not responsible for anybody except himself and his constituents in Kentucky. And I think he's, as far as
is that what his constituents in Kentucky want, though, Carl?
I knew I was going to get some kibitzing on this point.
I mean, come on.
My guess is that he's voting his conscience, and that he's showing, I think, that he thinks. I mean, look, I know what he said. He think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was qualified for this position. A lot of people agree with that. My own view, and I guess we can give our own views, we are on this show 5 times a week, is that Trump picked some interesting people and put them in the wrong positions. I mean, I had a friend of mine who's a lawyer said that he doesn't think RFK should be at that agency, said he'd have been great at EPA. That's how he made his reputation. Is as an environmental lawyer. Tulsi Gabbard, I've said before in this show, I think she'd have been terrific as head of the VA. He's got these people, maybe not in the positions that the Washington establishment would expect them to be in. And Mitch McConnell's part of the Washington establishment. I think he's registering his displeasure with that. But he's showing, I think he's not entirely comfortable with what Tom said. That Donald Trump is taking, what you said, Andy, that Donald Trump that's now his party. Mitch McConnell is not going quietly into that good night.
Well, Tom, what about Kash Patel? He's got to be voted in by the full Senate. We've talked about
this is their last chance, Andy.
Yeah, is this it? Because after this, I don't know, you're going to get Linda McMahon out of Department of Education. I mean, what scalp is left to claim?
Yeah, in that sense, it's probably not great for Kash Patel that he ends up sort of last in the lineup, because the pressure increases on.
They're going to throw at his head, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So we'll see what happens. I mean, again, I think though, that Republicans are pretty much on board. I mean, I didn't sense, obviously he got a lot of pushback from Democrats during his hearing, but I didn't sense a ton of pushback from Republicans. And so maybe you'll get Mitch McConnell. At this point, I fully expect him to vote against Patel, just based on what he's done in the past. But question is, will these other senators do what they've done with these, most controversial nominees? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I mean, this has always been a situation where Republicans have the votes. They have the votes. Right. It's just a matter of whether they stick together, and so far they have.
Well, there's only 47 Democrats left in the House, Andy, and on these picks that we've been talking about, they've all voted against it.
Yeah, that's true. And but as Tom points out, the Republicans have the votes, and elections have consequences, as someone once said.
Barack Obama said that to Eric Cantor and John Boehner.
Right. So on Wednesday,
didn't Republicans vote overwhelmingly for all of Joe Biden's nominees, Carl? Isn't that true that if Republicans had voted, 45 Republicans had voted against Lloyd Austin and some of these other folks, wouldn't the media have been scolding to that, sort of partisan approach to politics?
That's right, Tom. And I was thinking that yesterday during the vote. On yesterday's vote, Tulsi Gabbard, is that, advise and consent shouldn't mean that's not the person I would have picked, and this idea that I'm worried about this precedent that you're talking about, Tom. Is that the new normal? Because a president should be able to pick his or her cabinet. That's, and everybody agrees with that in theory. What the Democrats would say, well, we voted for Marco Rubio. We just voted against these people who are clearly unqualified. That's what they'd say. And you know what? About half of them probably mean it. But the other half are just doing what the leadership tells them to do. And that's not what the founders envisioned by Senate's advice and consent, that the one political party would just all march lockstep to block a nominee. So I don't think that's a great look. On the other hand, these Democrats got up and made their case. They said Chuck Schumer, they said why they were voting against these nominees. And for the most part, it wasn't, except with Pete Hegseth, that got a little out of control there. But they weren't ad hominem attacks for the most part. They were saying their reasons. So
it's a principled stand. Hey, I want to talk about something else though, which on Wednesday, yesterday, a federal judge approved of Trump's buyout offer to federal workers. And this means at this point, more than 75,000 federal workers have accepted this offer. This is according to the White House. It represents just under 4% of the civilian federal workforce. Trump administration aims to cut 5 to 10%. So, Carl, is this the right way to right-size the federal government?
Well, what we don't know is who's taking these buyouts. If it turns out, Elon Musk and the president are acting so precipitously that these things are happening in record time. If 65,000 of the 77,000 federal workers who initially took this buyout were going to retire by the end of the year or next year anyway, will it make a difference? Are the positions being frozen? There's so much more to know about this. We've talked before. Elon Musk's experience in this regard is taking over Twitter and getting rid of 75% of the people who work there, and he thought they were redundant. And I don't know that they all were, but a lot of them were. That's his experience. I don't know what happens if it turns out that all these federal employees aren't redundant, but I suspect that the government will still be able to function. But how many more of these will we see? And when they start if they really succeed in getting rid of entire agencies, the Department of Education, as you guys remember, Trump didn't just mention this during the campaign. He said, I can't wait to get rid of that agency. It's my top priority.
Just called it a con job yesterday, Carl.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know where this is heading, but these dueling U.S. District Court judges around the country who are cast these rulings, you got to think these things are going to go to an appeals court, and then some of them all the way to the Supreme Court. But the 77,000, they voted with their feet, as we used to say in Washington.
It's a pretty good deal for them, and in some sense, I mean, it's an 8-month. They get paid for 8 months, and if you wanted to stay, Tom, apparently they've asked you to return to work in person and to embrace what are called new performance standards, which require you to be, quote, reliable, loyal, and trustworthy in their work. What do you make of that? Is there a loyalty test going on here? Does that bother you at all, or do we just assume that they should be loyal, good working Americans anyway?
I think that's meant to be sort of, not necessarily a loyalty test, although I'm sure some people will take it that way. But this whole thing, 70,000, you remember that famous old joke, what do you call 100,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. And I know Carl wants to be sensitive.
Telling lawyer jokes now? Come on, fellas.
Porter's not on the show right now, but he'll
Well,
probably see this. And
my
I'll get a
son's
phone
a
call
lawyer, and
about it.
so is my daughter-in-law. So tread carefully.
Sorry, but the point, I know, and we're trying to be sensitive to, some of these folks, Carl, and these are real humans. But the point being, we have what, 2.1 million federal workers in Washington, D.C. I mean, it is a good start. I think the government is bloated. I think most people look, trimming fat is it happens in every single for-profit company in America, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000 employees. There comes a time when you have to trim some fat. The federal government has never trimmed fat, ever. And so this is the first time, and I think it's long overdue. And so, I hope that number goes up. I mean, I hope, and again, it is a pretty good deal. I mean, if I were a federal employee, I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to get 8 months of pay, and I can, I have that much time to find a new job and start a new chapter in my life. I mean, I would see that as a real opportunity.
But Tom, the troubling thing, and Andy alluded to it in his question, which you evaded answering, was whether this,
I just had to get out my
whether this is a loyalty oath or not. And you would look at that language and you could say, hey, it sounds like the Boy Scout code. No, it's not loyalty oath. But the Attorney General fired these lawyers at the Justice Department and said we need lawyers who will do, the president's bidding. So this doesn't happen in a vacuum. And one of the lawyers fired at the Justice Department was Corey Amundson, who was head of the Public Integrity Section. This guy never did anything wrong. And, he was only involved in the Jack Smith thing in a peripheral possible way. This cutting the federal workforce has become, it's in the context of this retribution that the president is exacting against people he thinks crossed him, ranging from the Kennedy Center board to the Justice Department. And in that context, I think this administration should be very careful about using language that suggests that the civil service should be personally loyal to the president.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah,
that's fair enough. I mean, I think part of the problem that this administration is fighting too, though, Carl, is that there are that could also be read as, look, just, as far as doing your job, being efficient and being, did they use the term loyal? What was the term, Andy? That they used?
Yeah, they did say you have to be reliable, loyal, and trustworthy.
Reliable, loyal, and trustworthy. Look, yeah. I think part of
loyal to the country, okay. Loyal to a partisan politician, not okay.
Yeah.
Well, but this is also happening in the context, Carl, of the last 8 years, where various parts of the civil service have been politicized and weaponized against Donald Trump, conservatives, Republicans, et cetera. And so if we could just reset and get back to some sort of normal, sort of apolitical, workforce in the federal government, that would be a win.
Well, I agree with that. And it wasn't just civil servants, some of these political appointees. this guy wrote a book. We've carried his byline, how we're subverting Donald Trump's wishes.
Right.
That's not good either.
I mean, right. It is a fact that most of the federal workforce, a huge majority of the federal workforce, votes for, supports Democrats. I mean, there was just a story in the Washington Times about this the other day. I mean, it's a known fact, and we'd like to see, again, vote for whoever you want, but don't bring that stuff into work. Just do your job and be as efficient and effective as you can carrying out your tasks.
All right. Well, guys, we're going to take a break right now. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. Don't go away. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And Tom, Attorney General Pam Bondi said on Wednesday that she is suing the state of New York and its top officials for their resistance to federal efforts regarding illegal immigration. It was her first press conference as AG, and she said this. She said, as you know, we sued Illinois, and New York didn't listen, so now you're next. New York governor responded, calling the lawsuit smoke and mirrors. So, Tom, how serious is this break between New York and Washington?
That's a good question. I mean, look, again, I'm not a lawyer. Maybe we should have Porter back on the show to talk about, how realistic these lawsuits are and what they can realistically expect. But it's certainly from a symbolic standpoint. I mean, this administration and the Attorney General is making the case that, this is a priority and you better get on board. or there will be consequences. I think for too long, the federal government has looked the other way as states and municipalities have sort of thumbed their nose at a lot of federal laws, but immigration in particular, and these sanctuary cities that said, "Oh, we're not going to cooperate with ICE." I mean, they just arrested someone in Massachusetts yesterday. This is, horrible. This guy was a sex offender, and multiple victims, and just kept getting let out. I mean, it was just a horrible story. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that the American people just will not stand for, I don't believe. And so they're supportive, continue to be supportive of this administration's push and priority on illegal immigration.
Well, so Carl, the state statute that's in question here, it's called the Green Light Law. What it does, it allows the state's Department of Motor Vehicles to issue driver's licenses to undocumented workers. But the real problem is that that same state law limits the state from sharing that data with the feds, and it requires any state official to notify the license holder. So that would be the illegal immigrant when a request is made for information about them. That's sort of where the rubber meets the road here, at least. When you look at it in that context, it sounds like to me, it sounds like the feds have a pretty good case. I mean, this is really designed to stop the immigration services from finding illegal aliens, and that's their job.
Well, and these states, these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states went further than that, Andy. They explicitly, and these guys held press conferences, they bragged about it. Mayors, governors, we are forbidding our local law enforcement from cooperating with ICE, with the immigration officials. And this is true even if they were looking for criminals. In California, there were some notorious cases where people were charged with murder, and then it turns out that ICE wanted them, but the California authorities wouldn't let ICE know where they were. So this has been brewing. In the case of New York, there's a sort of a backstory though, and that is Donald Trump is from New York. He doesn't live there anymore. He may still have his place at Trump Tower, but he's a resident of Florida. And the whole state, the whole operation of New York, the whole criminal justice system, the whole Democratic Party apparatus, and the Democrats run that state, went after Trump and said so. Letitia James ran for office saying she would, neuter the guy. Alvin Bragg did the same thing. They charged him criminally. They charged him civilly. That, when he denied a sexual assault charge, a civil suit was filed against him for slander. They just went after this guy in every way. And now he's fighting back. He would say, now I'm going after them. So that's the sort of macro story here.
Hmm. Well, Tom, a wrinkle on this is that New York Mayor Eric Adams met today with Trump's border czar, Tom Homan. And the mayor is complaining that the Trump administration is clawing back this $80 million from FEMA that was sent to New York to house illegal immigrants in New York hotel rooms. The timing of this is a little strange because we talked about earlier this week. I mean, the mayor
just think Eric Adams should be grateful, Andy?
Yeah. It's just, Anyway, what do you make of that? Is he not reading the room, or what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, right? And Tom Homan expressed his displeasure at this prior to this meeting, so we'll see. Yeah, I mean, the guy gets a pardon, and suddenly he's upset with the administration.
Well, he didn't get a pardon.
Well,
they decided not to prosecute him for now.
That's true.
Yeah,
they dropped
for now,
the
which
case.
is well, it's pretty interesting because after the election in the fall, they said this thing could be revisited. So
Yes.
they do have a little sort of Damocles hanging over his head, right?
Well, but think about this, guys. This money went to the Roosevelt Hotel, among others,
Right.
To house these migrants. It's been paid. The hotel's been paid. Who is the hotel going to now be bankrupt, or is New York City going to have to make the difference? It strikes me that this is going to end up in litigation.
Tom, last word.
Well, look, I mean, the money has been spent, and it probably will end up in litigation. But again, the larger point, this administration, Carolyn Leavitt said this yesterday at the podium at the White House. This administration is not going to stand for tens of millions of dollars being spent, of FEMA aid, no less, being spent on behalf of people who are in the country illegally, while you have people that are still suffering in Western North Carolina, California, other places around the country who are getting a pittance, who've gotten nothing. That's just not going to stand from the administration. And again, I think that's probably a winning position with the public.
Yeah, you're probably right. Hey, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Real Clear Politics right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and my next guest is Michael Bright. He is the CEO of the Structured Finance Organization. It's an industry group that represents financial institutions across the country. So, Michael, welcome back to the program.
Andrew, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So, Michael, we check in with you on occasion to get what insiders are thinking about what is going on in financial regulation. And I wanted to start with this Senate bill to cap credit card interest rates. It's co-sponsored by Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders. It tries to make good on a campaign promise that Trump made last fall. The bill seeks to cap credit card interest rates at 10% for the next 5 years. According to Forbes, the current average credit card rate is 28.72%. So when Josh Hawley, Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump agree on something, people tend to take notice. What do you think of it, and what do your members say about capping credit card interest rates?
Well, it's an arbitrary number, and interest rates have been climbing on their own. So, you know, if you're gonna have some sort of a cap, I mean, I think like a HOPA like cap where you know, you say a spread is the maximum that you can charge would probably make a heck of a lot more sense than an actual number. I mean,
A spread would be setting a number
like, you know,
between.
HOPA is like, you know, prime plus a certain number of
Right.
points. You can't go above that. I mean, that if you're just talking about you know, comparing the policy outcomes of those two things, like having some sort of a spread would be a lot more sensible than a number itself, especially since, you know, mortgage rates are at 7% and inflation is stubbornly high. So I don't think that that anybody's giving this really much of a chance of actual passage. I think especially in a rising interest rate environment. So we'll follow it a little, but I don't know that the odds makers are saying that this thing is particularly likely.
And why is it unlikely? I mean, people have tried this in the past. I mean, the Bush administration tried it. The Obama administration has tried it. People have tried to cap interest rates on credit card debt. Like I say, you've got everyone from Bernie Sanders to Josh Hawley. They don't see eye to eye on many things. And you have the president who actually made this a campaign pledge. It would seem to me that it would have a chance, but I read the same things you do. That's the sort of feeling is that this is a non-starter. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, these credit card loans are obviously unsecured consumer loans. So, you know, there's no asset that you can go get if a borrower walks away from the obligation of a credit card. Credit card debt has been going up, and so have delinquencies in that space, as are interest rates. So if you look at interest rates going up, total outstanding credit card debt going up, and at the margin, although it's, you know, there's nothing to be alarmed about in terms of delinquency rates, but consumers are increasingly stretched, trying to keep up with inflation. Putting some sort of a cap on those rates, I think, would have a pretty material effect in terms of who could get a credit card going forward. So I think you'd have just a lot of people shut out from being able to borrow in an unsecured manner.
Right. And so because I guess ultimately, like all this kind of regulation, it messes with the sort of underlying economics of the business. If you cap the rate, it's like capping anything. It's like a rent control.
People,
right.
Those have quite mixed results, and
yeah. So I guess I can see that argument against it. At the same time, it's pretty popular. Let's talk about this another issue, which is the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Donald Trump is basically shutting this down. They've nominated someone to head it now. Russell Vought he's Trump's OMB director. He was the head briefly. Now Jonathan McKernan, he's a former board member of the FDIC, is going to head the bureau on a permanent basis. This agency is supposed to protect consumers. It sounds like McKernan's real job is to shut the lights off there. What do your members feel about shutting down the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau?
It's a pretty aggressive move. I mean, I think that we definitely think that Chopra did some stuff that was not helpful for the consumers that he was attempting to protect. I mean,
Chopra was the previous
yeah,
head, right?
particularly some of the use of lawsuits and enforcement action and going after trusts as opposed to bad servicers from bad servicing practice. I do think that servicers should be held to a very clear standard. I think that as a homeowner or a borrower of in any asset class, your primary point of contact is going to be with the servicer, and I think that having any sort of a race to the bottom in servicer quality would not be particularly good. So they're doing a lot of stuff very, very quickly. I would move more cautiously. That's me, but I'm not, part of the Doge world, and they definitely are doing a lot of stuff in rapid succession. And it's very clear that they sending warning shots to the bureau that you're unwanted and you should not come in even to the office, as they were saying. I will say with Jonathan, I know Jonathan very well. So he worked for Senator Corker not long after I worked for Senator Corker. Senator Corker and Jonathan and I would consider all of us sort of centrists on these types of policies, try to call balls and strikes. When they announced him yesterday, I haven't quite fully processed, I think, all the ramifications for that, because he's never struck me as I'm going to take a job and spend 4 years doing nothing type person. I mean, he's a smart person with a lot of ideas and opinions and ambitions and all these types of things. So, I had been, I guess, falsely operating under the assumption, or potentially, I should say, falsely operating under the assumption that that job was going to be someone who was going to be told, don't do anything for 4 years and just walk away from any enforcement actions you've got. I'd be surprised, knowing Jonathan, as a person, if that would be something that would be of interest to him. But we'll have a confirmation process, and I think it'll be a very substantial confirmation process. I don't envy him in having to prep for that in this environment where there's a lot of forces around him that are, exerting their influence on the Bureau itself. But we'll have to see. I had a very strong opinion that the Bureau is basically going to be doing nothing. That opinion seemed to be backed up by the fact that they were telling them not even to come into work. The Jonathan pick as a permanent director changes that thesis, I think, a little bit, but I'll give him time to put together his thoughts and his priorities, and then see how the confirmation process goes.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So you think that he actually, given his past record of being involved, would actually try to keep the Bureau going in some way, but it doesn't sound like Doge wants that to happen, and certainly President Trump doesn't want it to happen. Jamie Dimon, who's the head of JP Morgan, said yesterday he would not mourn the demise of CFPB. Is that where most of your members come down, that they would like to see this thing go
on? Mixed. I think there's very complicated mixed opinions, and again, I want to talk when I'm speaking to Jonathan. I don't want to be putting any words in his mouth. He's going to have plenty of work to do on that. I'm talking about the personality of somebody that I know who likes to do good policy, and I've seen call balls and strikes on stuff, but I don't know his view on the Bureau specifically. So I want to be very, very clear on that. I don't, I think in general sense that the prudential regulators prior to the creation of the Bureau maybe didn't do a particularly good job at consumer protection. I think there's probably a widespread sort of sense of that, but the way the Bureau was structured, this limitless funding from the Federal Reserve, sort of an unaccountability of a director, not having a bipartisan commission, broad latitude to define lots of different things. Literally, they define what is a qualified mortgage, which is the legal safe harbor from liability for the ability to repay rule. They've given a patch to Fannie and Freddie on that for a very long time. They have in the past used enforcement action. They've gone up. They've, like, in our world, this NCSLT lawsuit where they sued the trustees for the practices of a servicer. I mean, they've done enough things to have people say, we understood the intellectual concept here. We didn't like the way it was structured. We think it was kind of structured in a little bit too much power, a little bit too much autonomy, and they haven't helped themselves with the way they communicate sort of with industry. So, I don't love when I talk to the Bureau and I say, hey, for example, if we're putting together a deal, we don't want to have a bad servicer on the deal. Is there a mechanism for us to communicate with you on what servicers to avoid? And if their answer is, we'll go to the complaints board, Like that's not a particularly helpful answer because the complaints board is a gossip board. So they haven't done stuff, I don't think, to endear themselves to their
Right.
complaints.
So let me just ask you sort of the bottom line question, which is, with the CFPB being either shut down or reorganized or whatever happens there, what does it do to consumers? Does it actually leave them with fewer protections? Because the Bureau has worked in the past to stop excessive payday loans. It's successfully sued some large banks. So what does this mean for consumer protection going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that they don't shut down some, at least, especially the more egregious aspects of it. I mean, I think that the Bureau can do a much better job working with industry to send smoke signals to industry when they see something that they don't think is working and try to have a productive dialogue. Again, where I think the Bureau and industry have gotten off track or off sync with one another is when industry goes to the Bureau and says, can you help us understand if this is a problem? Let us explain to you what's going on or not. And the Bureau they have a posture that seems to want to attempt to maintain maximum flexibility for themselves, particularly when it comes to enforcement. And I think that it's very difficult to be in the consumer lending space, particularly to the marginalized communities in that regard, because you don't know when a hammer is going to drop on your head. So the best outcome from all this, in my opinion, would be a little bit more of a productive discussion where people, say, are we trying to do the same thing for our consumers, and can we talk? Coupled with, if you identify a bad actor doing something that's particularly egregious, hope violations, or payday loan limit violations, or UDEP violations, then go after that actor. After giving them warnings, you give them a warning. They don't listen, you do what you need to do. I mean, I think that there is a middle ground where all of this can work. I had been, I guess, to get back to where we started, I'd begun operating under the assumption that the zeitgeist was going to be just don't do anything for 4 years, and then at some point there'll be a Democrat back in power, and then the Bureau will go back to operating the way that they had, and you're just gonna have this pendulum swinging between do nothing and be very, very aggressive. I'd like to find a place in the middle where they have a role to play in the regulatory landscape, particularly consumers, but they also have a cooperative dialogue with people in industry who have shown good faith efforts to attempt to serve consumers while also not running afoul of regulations. That opportunity, in my opinion, exists. So maybe we can get there.
Well,
it's moving fast. I mean, the news cycle is all over the map right now, so it's hard to keep track of all of it. Again, I wouldn't have been as aggressive, and I would have in running the Bureau in terms of use of enforcement action without at least communicating with industry. At the same time, I wouldn't tell all these employees don't come into work, shut everything down, we're burning the building. There's a lot in the middle that I think could be more effective.
Well, Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we'll be right back after these words. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and for our next segment, we've invited Charlie Stone, a contributor at RCP, to share part of his latest interview that he conducted for Real Clear Politics. Charlie's guest is Anthony Scaramucci. He is the founder of Skybridge Capital and served as White House Director of Communications from July 21st to July 31st, 2017. And now here's Charlie Stone in conversation with Anthony Scaramucci.
You have a lot of nicknames. Are there some nicknames that you have that you don't like and some that you like?
I mean, which ones do you like, Charlie? You tell me, because at the end of the day, I've been called so much worse than whatever my nicknames are that I'm okay with all of them.
Well, I don't know, like Mooch. You seem to use that.
I'm good with Mooch.
You call me Mooch? I'm not going to call you Mooch. I just was curious because sometimes people call me nicknames. And I'm like, I don't like it.
What's your nickname, Charlie, that you like? Do you like any of the Chip?
I don't like, I've never been called Chip.
Okay.
But that's an interesting name.
Old Chip.
And Chuck, never a Chuck.
You don't look
and then Charles, when I was in trouble, my mother is gone, but I still shake when I hear Charles because I think I'm in trouble.
Yeah, but you don't look like a Chuck, though. I think you're all right. I think you're all right with Charlie, actually.
Okay, let's just stay with Charlie. Well, we appreciate your time. And before we begin to get into your illustrious career, What are you up to now?
I mean, the good news for me is like when you get fired like I did, and believe it or not, I've been fired almost 8 years ago from the White House. And if you own your own company, you just go back to your own company. No drama.
You and I share that.
I mean, people have
I'm
tried
an
to-
entrepreneur
it's funny,
too.
there's been an attempt to cancel me from the left when I worked for Donald Trump. Then I got fired from Donald Trump. A couple of years later, I disavowed him. There's been an attempt to cancel me from the right. And so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who's out there left to try to cancel me, but I'm still here. Sorry, guys.
Well, let's dig into that because you share, I think, a record of 10 days as the
11.
White House. 11.
Yeah, look, don't chip me out of that last day. I think it's an important day. I got fired on that last day.
I know, but was it a full 24 or was it like 9 hours?
I left the White House at 3:00.
Okay, I don't,
I mean, if
fine.
you got to the White House at 6 a.m. that day and you left at 3:00, it's sort of a full day. And by the way, when the president is going off on me on Truth Social and
Yeah.
calling me a major loser and things like that, he does reference 11 days. I think he should be the official score.
Okay,
I know he lies about most of the numbers in his life, and he does all kinds of
I'll let the
exaggerating things, but-
comment section decide.
All right, you'll let the
Comment
comment
section, is it 10, 10.7, 11?
Let me provide some
You know,
advocacy
you
here.
sound
if you work
as-
a full day on the 21st, and you literally work a full day on the 31st,
All right.
it's not 31 minus 21. Count the days. It's 11 days.
Okay. All right. I will give that to
Also,
you.
an 11 is a lucky number for me. It always shows up in my life, so I'm pretty sure it was 11 days.
But it definitely wasn't 12 days. Like, we know that for sure.
Wasn't, but I do want, that is one of my wishes. Like,
That you hit 12?
if a president gets back into the White House that actually likes me, and they want to let me like wash dishes or like,
Yeah,
feed
you'll
the
do 12.
dogs or something like that. I just want to get to an even dozen days. I think it would be important.
All right. Well, let's, you can have your own vision board that in your kitchen and tell the universe you want that. And that might just happen for you.
Yeah, I'm manifesting it.
Manifest your destiny. Mooch's destiny. But just take me back. Like, you obviously have a good spirit about that experience, but what was that like? 11 days and they're like, look, everybody says if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog, right? Because they're,
I mean, even the dogs are biting now in Washington, though. I mean, there's really nothing left. I mean, people go after each other hard. I mean, one of the funniest things that Trump did a couple of things during that period of time that were very memorable for me. So one of them happened on a Wednesday, Charlie. You know how I know? Because I was only there for one Wednesday. So that's how I know. Okay. So he was like fingering Paul Ryan and telling him that he worked for him. And I remember Paul just looking at him very confused and was like, I actually don't work for you. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm in a separate article of the Constitution. So that was a funny thing. And then at one time we were in the study. I think we were having a sandwich together in the study off the Oval Office. And he said something to me I thought was great. He said, I thought I was a killer. I mean, I was a billionaire and I was dealing with other killers and real estate in New York. And he looks at me, he goes, Anthony, he goes, the secretaries here would kill those people. This town is so rough that the assistants will stab you in the eyeball with an ice pick, and then they'll drop your eyeball in a martini glass, and they're still talking to you. You're bleeding at the table. They're still talking to you like nothing happened. And he didn't expect Washington to be what it was, but I think he's ready for it now. Okay, I don't think they're ready for him as much as they were ready for him in 2017. I don't think they're ready for. I don't think. Let me put it this way: he was not ready for them in 2017. They're not ready for him now. He is a reptile brother. Okay, he has a reptilian personality where you're in his field of vision. If you're useful to him, he'll be charming. If you're not useful to him, he'll discard you like you're a piece of tissue and sometimes toilet paper. And he'll hit you with the car to take you out of his field of vision if that's also necessary.
let's say that someone young called you, because it seems to me there's some youngins in the White House today, and said, Mr. Scaramucci, I'd love your advice. How do I deal with the president? How do I best ensure that I'm not fired, that I serve my nation, but I'm also not fired?
I would say to those people, stay away from the president. I would say to those people, have as limited interaction with him as you can. I think that the proclivity for people that work in the White House or the West Wing or the old executive office building, airtime with the president is like oxygen. Okay, it's like airtime for a news anchor. They want to be on TV. They want to be present in the president's face and so forth. I would say get out of his way and focus on whatever the portfolio is that you're working on for the American people. Focus on serving the American people, not yourself. And I think it's a wonderful privilege to serve the American people. But if you're in Washington and you get too close to Donald Trump, you're going to get burned. He will wipe out the closest people to him over the next 4 years. He'll disintegrate them. And so, it'll be Elon, J.D. Vance, they'll all get hit by the Trump bus. It just naturally happens because that's him. He's now taking security clearances away from people. He asked Esper and Milley to organize a missile strike against General Soleimani from Iran. Iran has put a fatwa up against those people. Trump doesn't like those people anymore, but they took his orders, served the American people, served the American public, worked towards making the American people more safe. And now because they're in a tiff with Donald Trump, he's taking their security clearances away. So I don't know, you tell me, is that the right thing to do? Is he going to try to take Kamala Harris's security clearance away? She was the former vice president. She is entitled to protection for a period of time. What are we doing? And so this sort of norm breaking is really unhealthy. I get that we probably have fraud in the government. I get that we have redundancy. I get that we need to re-engineer, refresh our government, but we also should have a process because it is a democracy. We shouldn't go rogue on the whole thing.
As you look back on history and your personal experience with President Trump, is there a historical figure that sort of stands out and says, that Trump is like that one?
So it's like if Huey Long had a baby with Charles Lindbergh, and then they both died in Charles's airplane. They got crashed out, and they let Roy Cohn raise the baby. That's what we got going on here. That's Donald Trump. Who is the most significant political figure in the world? It's Donald Trump. Moreover, who has empowered, emboldened, and enabled Donald Trump more than anybody? That would be Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden, by beating Donald Trump in 2020, weirdly elongated the Trump era. So he operated a shadow-like oppositional narrative against Joe Biden for 4 years. And then he reascended to power. So instead of just being a garden variety 8-year termed out president, he's now on the presidential stage for 12 years, which is half of a generation. And he's also been emboldened by being in the wilderness for 4 years, and which is why he's hitting the establishment as hard as he is 16, 17 days into the presidency.
So in your analysis of how he thinks, how he negotiates, when his new Gaza, the new, vacation place and dispelling 1.8 million people, is he just messing with people's heads while he does other work?
Aside, so no. If you said, I got to flood the zone and I got to do 200 things at the same time, all of which you'll be outraged by, so a result of which you can really only respond to 10 of them, and the courts will block half of them, but some of these outrageous things will get through. I will have been successful. So the question is for Trump supporters, does Trump want to help the system, or does Trump want to hurt the system? What does he want to do? Help the system or hurt the system? And if you guys think he wants to help the system, okay, so how is he helping the system? By putting tariffs on, taking tariffs off, saying that he's going to be in Gaza, having his people have to say, no, he doesn't really mean that. Like, what is the goal? What is the end game? If you're telling me that you're going to unleash Elon Musk to right-size the government, I do believe, Charlie, that the government does need to be right-sized. But we are in a democracy, so hire somebody that's an OMB chief from the Democrats, hire somebody that's an OMB chief from the Republicans, maybe get 2 judges, make it bipartisan, and say, look, we're going to let Musk do this. He's an extremely talented guy, but there's going to be some checks and balances or some oversight of the process, and the information that he's uncovering or the things that he's doing is going to be shared in a bipartisan way to the Senate Appropriations Committee or something like that. My point is, running roughshod over everybody is not going to help improve the system. It's going to just create more cynicism and more distrust in the system.